Kingdom Come Deliverance has been around for a few years now, but with the release of its sequel just around the corner, I thought I'd dive back into it. While plenty of guides for the game already exist, many are either a loose assortment of tips and tricks or focus on exploits or grinding your way through KCD's realistic medieval setting. So instead of adding another top 10 video to the pile or telling you that you should spend the first 2 hours of the game just picking herbs or punching cows, we'll dive in a bit deeper for an extensive walkthrough of the game's first few hours, some important info on what to do and perhaps not to do, as well as some tips and tricks for beginners, advanced and even hardcore mode players alike, all condensed into one video. Hey there, my name is Pete, and today we complete an extensive getting started guide for Kingdom Come Deliverance. Instead of throwing a bunch of random tips and tricks at you, this guide is designed to walk you through the first few hours of the game, explaining what to do and what to avoid to make your experience as smooth and rewarding as possible. This video is also tailored specifically for hardcore mode players. In fact, all footage was recorded in hardcore mode with all negative perks enabled, although everything here applies just as well to regular difficulty. If you're aiming for achievements like the infamous "'Tis but a Scratch" or working towards a completionist run, this guide will also help you get started on the right path, as I will make sure to present you with options that keep all achievements in mind. One last note before we dive in: I'll try to keep spoilers to a minimum, but this is a story-driven RPG, so discussing early quests and mechanics means we will touch on some story spoilers. However, if you have found your way here, chances are that you're already familiar with the game's major plot points, at least those from the first few hours. And with all of that out of the way, let's jump into it and begin. The game begins in the village of Skalitz, Henry's home and your tutorial, but it's packed with small opportunities to set yourself up for success in the hours to come. So let's break it all down step by step to ensure you leave this area with a solid foundation for the challenges ahead. First of all, when speaking with your mother in your very first conversation, make sure to choose the speech options twice. Speech is one of the hardest skills to level in the game, so gaining early experience here is crucial.
Nothing much. Me and the lads were just having a chat in the tavern.
This also gets you to main level 2, allowing you to select the ascetic perk to slow down your hunger meter, a handy bonus especially in hardcore mode, and even more so if you've got the negative tapeworm perk active, which increases your hunger rate. While food is generally not too difficult to come by, this perk allows you to carry a little less with you on your travels, definitely useful since early on Henry's carrying capacity is fairly low. And don't worry, you will eventually be able to redistribute your perk points and thus respec your character, so you are not forced to stick with this decision for the rest of the game. Now, once you've finished the conversation, loot the chest in your home to grab 3 Savior Schnapps. In hardcore mode, that's the only way you can save the game apart from sleeping or making an exit save. Everything else you can leave in there for now. Other hardcore mode limitations are displayed as soon as you exit the house, but before you do, grab and eat some food from the table, and also eat from the pot inside to fill your hunger bar. A nourishment value below 50 means you're hungry and suffer stat penalties, so try to avoid that. As you exit, and especially if you've chosen the negative tapeworm perk, note the location of the outdoor pot as well. I'll explain the food and drink mechanics in a bit more detail later, they are not really all that important during this prologue. Up next, you'll want to spend a few moments picking nettles around your house and the nearby areas to raise your herbalism skill. You want to aim for 100 nettles to unlock the resistance perk for a permanent +2 bonus to vitality, the stat that governs your stamina and in turn allows you to sprint for longer and perform more consecutive actions in combat. Don't worry, you won't have to sit through 100 individual picking animations for this. By gaining herbalism levels, Henry also begins plucking several plants at a time, and you gain your first levels quickly, so this will only take a few minutes. You'll already find about 45 nettles near your house, some of them hidden between rocks, and a further 20 near the castle wall, just past your father's forge and to the right of the 2 castle guards. Of course, feel free to pick any other herbs along the way, but nettles are the important one for now, And again, we don't want to turn the game into flower picking simulator, even though you will earn an achievement for picking 10,000, yes 10,000 herbs, so keep that in mind for a completionist playthrough. If you'd like to practice stealth early, there's a low-risk opportunity nearby. Sneak up behind the farmer here and choke him out to gain your first stealth XP. Be careful though not to kill him afterwards, at least if you're trying to unlock the Merciful achievement. Equipping some of his gear can also boost your charisma slightly, and what's more, after some time has passed, he will simply get back up and continue working as if nothing happened, allowing you to potentially choke him out multiple times during the prologue. If you don't do this right in front of the guard, who sometimes patrols the area, or your mother, who occasionally uses this path, there won't be any consequences, but it is still a crime, and if committing one isn't your thing, or repeatedly choking him out feels a bit cheesy to you, then feel free to skip this step. Once you've finished your initial tasks, it's time to speak with your father. Importantly, if you rush to him right after exiting your house, you'll miss out on an important speech check, so spend a few minutes exploring and picking herbs first. This delay will trigger the dialogue choice when you finally approach him, giving you another chance to level up your speech skill. Your father gives you a set of tasks to complete, and while the castle guards are nearby, we want to make sure not to grab the cross guard from them just yet. Instead, we want to head down to Kunesh's house, where we will once again pick the speech check for some important skill XP, and to avoid a fight that you're probably not ready for, especially if you're playing on hardcore mode. Either way, after Kunesh blows you off, sneak into his house and approach the locked chest in the room to the right to unlock the option to speak about lockpicks with your friend Fritz, who can hand you a few of them for free later on.
A locked chest. I'll need a lockpick to get into that. Fritz might have one.
Additionally, there's about 10 nettles growing behind Kunesh's barn, the building right next to his house. Don't forget to pick those before moving on. Even in hardcore mode, this should already get you to Herbalism level 3. Up next, head to the market, but make sure to skip the charcoal burner for now, otherwise you won't be able to get those lockpicks. Proceed to the tavern, where picking nettles along the fence should quickly get you to the 100 you need for the resistance perk, which unlocks automatically. Enter the tavern grounds for a brief cutscene, during which you want to agree to help, but only if you get help with Kunesh in return.
Alright, I'll do it, but then you have to give me a hand with something.
Afterwards, before your friends run off, talk to Fritz again to get 4 lockpicks from him. At this point, I would recommend spending a few more minutes picking all remaining nettles in and around the tavern courtyard to raise your Herbalism skill to level 5. This allows you to learn the Flower Power perk, a +2 charisma bonus whenever you have at least 30 fragrant herbs in your inventory, and conveniently the nettles you just picked count as fragrant. From here on out, make sure you always have 30 fragrant herbs in your inventory to benefit from this bonus at all times. Now, this next part is technically optional, but I highly recommend it. Just make sure to drink a Savior Schnapps and drop a save beforehand. Since Fritz just handed you some lockpicks, it might be a good idea to start practicing with those, and the tavern has a few easy opportunities for you. Overall, Skalitz has a ton of locks to pick, but for the purposes of keeping this guide somewhat condensed, I'll just go over the really useful ones. Heading inside the tavern through the door on the right and up the stairs leads you into a room with 2 easy locked chests that make for ideal targets. Lockpicking can be a bit finicky, especially with a controller, in which case I highly recommend switching to the simplified lockpicking setting in your game settings. This is, however, not available for keyboard and mouse controls, which mechanically are already pretty close to the simplified version. Another tip, keeping the yellow circle in its correct position is easier the closer that position is to the center of the lock. If it's too far on the outside, you can simply back out of the lockpicking menu and try again to find that the correct spot has been reset, rinse and repeat until you find a sweet spot that you're happy with. Nonetheless, especially for first-time players, lockpicking can take some time getting used to, hence the save you hopefully dropped earlier to get in a bit of practice here. Now, the 2 chests in this room only contain a handful of Groschen, KCD's currency, but we're mostly doing this for the lockpicking skill XP anyway. Heading back down, there's a door beneath the stairs that you can go through when nobody's looking, close it behind you and pick the 2 easy locks of the chest and the door in the corridor. This gets you your first lockpicking level up, enough to also pick the easy chest in the room behind the door. The other one is very hard and can't be picked yet. This chest contains a ton of food, which I recommend just leaving here, as most traders won't buy stolen goods anyway. Those who do only give you a fraction of its worth, most of it will spoil quickly, and grabbing everything will put you over your carrying capacity, resulting in a noticeable reduction in movement speed. What you should take, however, are the 2 Savior Schnapps and anything with unlimited durability, like mead, wine or spirits, coincidentally also the items with the highest value. You should now already be close to or even over the carry weight limit, so if you plan to keep stealing, and there is at least one fantastic chest coming up that I highly recommend, you might want to nip back home to drop off anything you don't need in your chest there. Once again though, if you want to roleplay as a Henry who doesn't do crime, then of course feel free to skip all of this. For a completionist playthrough though, be aware that the game has an achievement for stealing items with a total combined value of 30,000 Groschen. You can also get this by pickpocketing or looting knocked out people, but lockpicking is arguably the easiest way. Once your business at the tavern is concluded, meet your friends at the Deutsch's house. You'll need to lure the Deutsch's wife away, do so, and then, instead of returning to your friends, head into the house through the door on the other side. Make sure that no one spots you as you pick the front door, followed by the door on the right, and finally the mother lode, the chest in the room behind it. This chest contains some valuable clothing items, including the red outer jacket, your very first piece of light armor. Don't equip it just yet though, we'll save this one for later. Instead, proceed through the other unlocked door and also loot the living room chest for some more Groschen. If you're not there already, this should get you to lockpicking level 2. And if it doesn't, maybe because the front door wasn't locked, that can happen, there's more opportunities coming up. Return to your friends, watch a brief cutscene, and in the following fist fight, try to land as many punches as possible to gain valuable strength XP. Simply spam the attack button, your opponents are fairly weak. Don't worry too much about getting hit either. Even on hardcore mode with all negative perks, the fight likely won't last long enough to knock you out. Afterwards, you can run away with your friends like the game tells you to, or run the other way and get caught for a little extra flavor dialogue from the catch bowl. Don't worry, you will not end up in jail.
So you don't mind that we...
Don't gape like a stuffed squirrel. Do you take me for a German, lover?
Just like you asked them to, your friends will now wait for you at Kunesh's house. Depending on how beat up you are, you might first want to stop by your home. Your mother will provide healing free of charge.
There you are, good as new. You ought to learn to do that yourself.
This also allows you to drop off the stolen goods from the Deutsch and practice some more lockpicking on the chest in your home storage room. Take note of the unique die in there, but don't make the mistake of actually using it. It is a very bad die to play with, so better to just leave it stored away for now. While you're in the area, you can now also talk to the castle guards, who at this point, after witnessing the Deutsch's antics in the tavern but before dealing with Kunesh, have 2 extra dialogue options in addition to the one about the sword's crossguard. That one you can now pick up, and finally proceed to Kunesh's house.
Magnificent! Shame I can't keep the sword for myself.
Meet your friends behind the barn and ask them to help you beat up Kunesh. Once again, in the resulting fist fight, try to land as many punches as possible. Kunesh will eventually yield and hand you the keys to his trunk, but we still want to open it using a lockpick for those sweet experience points. Crucially, after receiving this permission from Kunesh, the items inside will no longer be marked as stolen if you take them, and the same is also true for Kunesh's axe on the chopping block outside, so take that too. Should you need some patching up, talk to your mother again, and then proceed to the marketplace. You can now exchange Kunesh's items at the charcoal burner, where you only need to purchase 10 charcoal to fulfill your father's request. In this and all further trades, don't forget to always haggle, even if it only saves you a few coins, as doing so increases your speech skill. The exact XP value is a bit hard to pin down. Initially I noted a flat 5 XP gain for successfully negotiating a price, but I've also found that repeatedly haggling for the same type of item or continuously haggling with the same trader makes the value go down. So don't go overboard with this, although it should be noted that even a failed haggle still earns you XP. A successful haggle also increases your reputation in the town or village you haggle in, not so important in Skalitz, where as a local you are well liked from the beginning, but this can come into play later.
That's a sum I can live with.
After acquiring the charcoal, you want to talk to Combat Master Venyak to get a very important lesson in sword fighting. He is pretty slow to move over to the training grounds though, so feel free to talk to him before initiating the conversation with the charcoal burner. Now, the fighting tutorial itself is fairly short and self-explanatory, however, it can be exploited for a little extra XP. Once you're prompted to chain your attacks, simply hit the combat master with single unchained strikes instead. Just leave a bit of time between your hits to avoid chaining them together. He will allow you to hit him like this for a good 3 minutes, which should result in level ups for your strength, sword and warfare skills. For strength, the first level up even earns you a perk point, but we don't want to spend it just yet, instead we'll keep it for later. Now at this point, we are pretty much done with everything there is to do in Skalitz. One final thing I recommend is playing a game of Farkle with this fella by the marketplace. If you want to make sure to profit, drop a save and bet the maximum amount. He shouldn't be too difficult to beat, as he doesn't have any special dice and the CPU tends to get a bit greedy at times.
Oh no!
The rules are explained in-game and in quite some detail too, so I won't go over them here. Strategically, you'll want to score with at least 3 dice per round, but play it safe. 200 to 300 points per round are perfectly fine early on until you meet stronger opponents. What you do next is pretty much personal preference. If you're up for a bit more stealing, the local trader is a good target, but make sure to save beforehand. To set you up for success, head in, go through to the back room, open the door on the left and head back out. That door was previously locked from the outside, but not anymore. So use it to head back inside, sneak up the stairs and find 2 locked chests in the room, one easy, one hard, but both can be picked even with a lockpicking skill of only 2. This is perhaps an important note. A lock's difficulty rating does not directly translate into a fixed skill level requirement. Some hard locks like this can be picked early, others need a higher skill, so it's always worth checking. The easy one just has a few groschen in it. The hard one, meanwhile, contains the trader's entire inventory, including a valuable kilted jacket, 3 more Savior Schnapps, some healing items and also some charcoal, so technically you don't even need to purchase it. Your father will use the stolen stuff just as well. The next room upstairs has 3 chests, one easy with a bit more money in it, and 2 harder ones. The hard one can be picked at lockpicking level 4, the very hard one will likely remain inaccessible. Speaking of which, should you reach level 3 in Skalitz, pick the lasting lockpicks perk to make your picks more durable, and thus able to withstand more wiggling on those hard and very hard locks you'll encounter down the line. Additionally, I recommend saving at least 1 lockpick for later, the rest can be freely used. There is one more house that might be worth looting, but this one's risky. It's this one, at the far end of the main market street, to the left of the gate. The front door has an easy lock, but is also often in view of guards or villagers. There's another easy lock door to the left, and behind it a hard locked chest that can be opened with only level 2 in lockpicking. This chest contains a few valuable crafting kits and some weapons, including a short sword that might be worth taking. Now, apart from the ones I already mentioned, there aren't really any further lockpicking spots in Skalitz that I would consider to be worthwhile. The remaining houses are well overlooked by guards and villagers or have people inside of them, making them very risky targets with comparatively low rewards. So what else is there to do? Well, you could sell some of your stuff, the legally acquired at least, to the traders in the marketplace, or you could pick and also trade some more herbs. Getting to level 10 in the Herbalism skill would allow you to select the Leg Day perk, which increases your strength every time you pick herbs, but you can also leave that for later. After all, we have spent quite some time in Skalitz already. If you're going for all achievements, one thing you definitely want to do at this point is to drop a save, or use one you made earlier, and get yourself arrested to unlock the Firestarter achievement, which you would otherwise miss. Spoiler alert, going to jail in Skalitz will in fact result in your death, so it can also be used to unlock the Kingdom Did Not Come achievement if you're playing in hardcore mode. One thing you should not do, in my opinion, is spend your groschen to purchase any additional Savior Schnapps, unless you really like to save scum or want to play things extremely risky and commit lots of crimes early on. The ones you find should suffice. Following this guide, you'll end up with at least 10 of them, and keep in mind that sleeping in a bed also saves your game. Finally, yes, you could theoretically also rob and murder pretty much the entire village, but we're trying to establish a somewhat realistic role-playing basis here, and we also don't want to spend the first 2 hours in Skalitz just taking out everyone. So eventually you'll run out of things to do, so head to the tavern and speak to Bianca. Once asked about the ale for your father, she also hands you 5 more Savior Schnapps for free, and with that you can return to the forge, hand everything over and wrap up the Skalitz Prologue. While you're prompted to grab the nails for Theresa, make sure to leave absolutely everything you don't need in the chest in your home, put on the lightest clothing items you can find, aim for a total carried weight of under 15, grab 2 or 3 marigold decoction healing potions, as well as a handful of food that does not raise tiredness. Bread, apples, vegetables and dried stuff is ideal, and then give Theresa the nails from your chest to unlock the Blacksmith's Son achievement and to trigger a lengthy cutscene. After the cutscene at your father's forge, it's time to run. You won't see him initially, but you have an enemy close on your heels running after you, and unless you went completely overboard power leveling Henry in Skalitz, you won't be able to defeat him in combat. So follow the path, hugging the mountain wall on the left until you reach a house and some horses in front of it. You'll also see Theresa being hassled by humans, so before mounting the first horse you see, whistle using the same key you used to mount the horse to attract the human's attention and to unlock the Cavalier achievement. Then ride off and watch another brief cutscene during which Henry unfortunately gets injured. Afterwards, you'll have to use your full gallop to stay ahead of the horse archers pursuing you. Stay on the path until Henry himself tells you to turn left.
Left. Talmberg is to the left, along the stream.
Alternatively, turn left immediately after passing the burning village of Rovna, the one with the big church tower. Not only does this shorten your path a bit, but upon crossing the stream a little further down the field, there's a good chance the enemy riders get tangled up in the terrain. If you see the sword icon at the top of the screen, switch from crossed to uncrossed swords. That means you're still in combat, but no one is actively shooting at you, which is a good thing, as your horse will eventually get tired, indicated by blowing and wheezing noises, and if the archers are still in pursuit, it is actually possible for them to kill you, although it is highly unlikely. Now, there is one slightly cheesy thing you might want to do to gain another small advantage for later. Once you cross this little stone bridge, ideally with your pursuers already far behind you, open your inventory and select the Sidekicks tab. Here, go to Tack, and you can see that apart from a plain saddle and bridle, your horse also carries a noble saddle worth over 1,000 Groschen and a second bridle. Take both, and maybe even the bridle your horse has equipped, although this will reduce the horse's speed slightly, so that's why we're doing it at the end of the ride here. The plain saddle, meanwhile, can stay on, it's just too heavy to be worth the hassle. Curiously, the noble saddle is not accessible before triggering the first cutscene involving the horse archers. Also, a warning, sometimes the game likes to turn your horse around after doing this, so pay close attention to avoid riding back into the human's arms. After following the path for just a little longer, you'll be treated to another cutscene as Henry finally reaches Talmberg. After your initial conversation with Lord Divish, he'll head to a side room for a private discussion with the bailiff that you can listen into for a bit of extra dialogue, but make sure to not step inside the room itself, as it is considered private. At this point, you are technically free to explore, but you're hungry and tired, so it's best to speak to Sir Robard right away, who'll lead you to the kitchen for some food. Very important at this point, there are several villagers who may approach you and ask about Skalitz. Agreeing to share your story triggers 2 simple dialogue checks for each of them that are easy to pass by just picking the speech option for some extra XP. However, these villagers are extremely easy to miss, and if you happen to walk away while they approach you, not only will you lose reputation, but you also won't be able to speak to them again. I recommend dropping a save as soon as you exit the Talmberg introductory cutscene, just to make sure you don't accidentally miss them. Now, no matter how rested or well fed you are when leaving Skalitz, you'll always arrive in Talmberg with rest at 30 and hunger at 15, so the kitchen is indeed where you want to go next. Let's take a brief moment to look closer at KCD's food mechanics, which are perhaps a bit more complex than those you might know from other games. Generally, all food satisfies your hunger, the game calls this nourishment, and plenty of foods also restore a small amount of health. Some foods, however, like cheese or roasted meats for example, also increase your tiredness, so stick to lighter options if you plan to stay active. This is especially important in this section as you are already very tired upon arriving. On top of these mechanics, most food items also spoil over time, the only exception are drinks and dried fruits and meats. Items with a red condition value are spoiled and can cause food poisoning, which reduces strength, agility and vitality while also gradually depleting your health. Therefore, always try to keep your nourishment between 50 and 100. Overeating, a value above 100, reduces your maximum stamina, while a value below 50 means you're hungry and does the same, and eventually even causes health loss due to starvation. Maintaining a value between 50 and 100 for 5 consecutive days also unlocks the Balanced Diet perk, which grants a permanent +1 bonus to vitality and agility. It won't be possible to unlock this just yet, but keep it in mind for later. For now, eat up, note the easy lock chest in the kitchen, and head to bed in the building in the courtyard. At this point, Henry is exhausted, so while you could explore the castle further, it's best to get a full night's rest. You also don't need to bother with how many hours of sleep exactly, it will soon be interrupted by a nighttime conversation with Lady Stephanie anyway. During this conversation, Lady Stephanie will ask about the events in Skalitz. This is a timed dialogue, so you need to choose your answers quickly. Agree to tell the story and stick to the charisma-based options to succeed every time and to further level up your speech skill. In Kingdom Come Deliverance, successful dialogue isn't just about using the highest stat, it's also about choosing options that match the tone of the conversation.
Oh.
As an example, in this nightly conversation with Lady Stephanie, going through the gruesome details of the Skalitz raid by picking the Intimidate option won't earn you any favors, while sticking to the more emotional and personal speech or charisma options matches her concern for you much better. And yes, speech and charisma are two different things in KCD. Speech is generally how persuasive you are, how capable you are of talking yourself out of situations or how well you can haggle, while charisma is more an overall measure of your social standing and impressiveness, if you will, which is why dressing in fancy clothes can improve this stat but not improve speech, and also why it works quite well here on the Lady of the Castle.
That's terrible. How could something like that happen?
After the conversation, Henry will go back to sleep, but not for long. This time he'll be woken up by Sir Robart. Despite Robart's urgency, this marks the perfect moment for some nighttime shenanigans, as it is dark and all the guards are on the battlements, leaving the inside of the castle largely unguarded. Many rooms have chests containing useful items that are much harder to get into during the day or once the guards return, so I hope you saved some lockpicks. Just like in Skalitz, I'll point out some recommended targets for you, starting with the room right next to yours. The door may or may not be locked, and the easy lock chest inside has plenty of clothing, some of it quite valuable. Early on, I'd recommend grabbing everything with a value to weight ratio of 25 or higher, just so you don't overload yourself with junk. Illuminate your path with the torch you grabbed from your end table, and find 2 more chests in the buildings around the courtyard. One behind the second door to the right upon exiting your sleeping quarters, and the other behind the wooden double door directly opposite. Both have some bandages that you might want to grab, otherwise pick your loot based on weight and value. Should you happen to reach lockpicking level 3 at any point, select the Lasting Lockpicks perk, we already talked about that one, and then it's time to make a decision. You can leave it at that, or not even pick any locks at all if that's what you wish to do, or you can snoop around a bit more. For example, in the room leading to the kitchen, there's a chest to the left that can hold some more valuable clothing items, and the chest in the kitchen itself can also be picked. Heading up the stairs into the room where you had your first conversation with Divish and Robart, there's a locked chest in the far right corner with goblets and other trinkets inside, and the door on the left can also be picked at skill level 3, although the chest and cabinet behind it can't be picked even at level 4. Lootable at level 4, meanwhile, is the chest in the sleeping chamberlain's room, while the bookshelf next to his bed can be accessed as it is for some literature that Henry can't read just yet. Taking the exterior steps to the top floor, you'll come across another chest to the right containing a few extra torches that you probably won't need, while the door right next to it leads into Lady Stephanie's room. And this room contains one of the highest value chests in Talmberg, and it's only an easy lock, giving you quick access to several high-value clothing items. The very hard chest in her room, meanwhile, cannot be picked, even at level 4, and the same is true for the other very hard chests on this floor. Only the hard one in the room next to Lady Stephanie's is accessible at lockpicking level 4. Heading to the far end of the corridor and back outside to the left leads to a wooden walkway that eventually brings you to a locked door leading into a watchtower. Inside, take the ladders going up. The first floor has a very easy, the second one an easy chest. Going down, meanwhile, there is nothing to loot. Heading back to that wooden exterior staircase, there is one more location you can explore, as another wooden walkway at the top leads into another guard tower on the right. In this one, however, there is a guard sleeping right next to the hard-locked chest, and even a successful lockpicking attempt is likely to be overheard.
Hey, what are you doing poking around in that lock?
So either choke the guard out in his sleep, at which point you might as well loot him too, or skip this chest altogether in favor of the one on the floor above. The loot inside is pretty much identical to the chest below. This also more or less concludes the list of targets available to you during this night, and depending on how thorough you were, you could now be quite a bit over the carrying capacity. In that case, dump your excess goods in the chest near the courtyard, the one behind the double doors. My personal recommendation for a balance of role-playing and skill progression would be to at least aim to reach lockpicking skill level 3 during this section, as the lasting lockpicks perk makes things much easier going forward. If you already reached that during Skalitz or with one of the first chests, then by all means feel free to keep going until you hit level 4, but you really don't need to go overboard. Either way, once you're done and have everything stored away, proceed to the battlements. You can talk to the guards and ask what's happening. Every bit of dialogue earns you a small amount of speech XP, but you won't get any answers until you reach Robard and Divish. After the cutscene, speak to Robard again, who tasks you with keeping watch. Walk around the battlements for a short while. One of the guards will approach you after a few moments, telling you to just wait.
I don't think anything much will be happening today. You can just lean against the wall and wait till morning.
You can either do so right here or head back to bed. It doesn't make a difference. If you wish, talk to a few more guards to get their opinion on the nightly events, then advance time until shortly after 5 AM, when you'll hear an alarm. This time, head out of the castle following the others and watch yet another cutscene. Once it finishes playing, it's time to start working on getting back to Skalitz. Start by speaking to Robard, who, regardless of how high your speech or charisma skill is, will deny you permission to leave the castle.
Sorry, lad, but I won't take orders. You'll have to wait until everything settles down, and maybe your lord will change his mind.
Speak to the gate guard afterwards, who will be a bit more easily persuaded with the speech option, but still won't let you leave just yet. Pointing out that you might want to disguise yourself as a Talmberg guard, your next objective is now clear. Let's hope you haven't used up all of your lockpicks. If you have, you'll need to visit Trader Votova, who is sitting on a bench in the village just next to the gate and has some for sale, but they are not cheap. Luckily, Lady Stephanie seems to like you, even if you robbed her blind during the night, so pay her a visit and exhaust all dialogue options for some advice on where to find a guard's uniform, and for a few groschen as well, enough to purchase a lockpick should you need one.
Thank you, my lady. I will repay you, I swear.
Even if you don't, paying Votova a visit afterwards might still be worth it, as he also sells a treasure map. There's 25 of these in the game, each leading to a hidden treasure. You can of course find those even without the map, but for the sake of true completion, acquiring all maps might be on your list, and Votova can sell you the first one. He will also accept stolen goods in return, albeit at a drastically reduced price. Regardless of how you dealt with Votova, I'd personally skip the map as it costs a significant amount of your current funds. Your next destination is now the armory, located near the stairs leading up to the battlements. The door is unlocked, but the area is private, so if guards see or hear you entering, they'll be quick to check on you. Thus, either make sure you slip in unnoticed, or loop around the battlements and head in from the other side, which tends to be a little less frequented. To advance the main quest, stealing and equipping the gear from the very easy chest on the ground floor is enough, but there's a bit more to be had if you go upstairs. Not only are there 4 barrels with arrows and sometimes weapons too in them, there's also 2 bows by the table and 2 hard-locked chests with shields and weapons. If you're lucky, you can sometimes find a valuable sword in one, or even in both of them, although Henry's agility stat will likely not allow him to use it effectively just yet. Additionally, grabbing a shield can help tremendously in some of the early combat encounters, and there are several available in the armory that are easy to take without being seen. Climbing the ladder down to the armory's bottom floor then reveals 2 more chests and another barrel. Although only the hard-locked chest can be looted, the very heart remains inaccessible even at lockpicking level 4. Once you have outfitted yourself, you're good to go, but do note, wearing stolen gear on you, that means having it equipped, will sometimes prompt guards to search you, especially if it is something very valuable and thus recognizable. You are safe from that happening in this scenario, but down the line it can happen. Selling and buying stolen goods back from people who accept them in the first place, like Votova or other fences you'll meet down the line, gets rid of this problem by removing an item's stolen tag, but it does cost a pretty penny. Now, before finally leaving Castle Talmberg, you can have one last small thieving spree, as some locks in rooms that are frequented by guards and villagers will have been relocked after the night is over, potentially allowing for a second picking and thus more experience points. Since it is daytime and the castle inhabitants have resumed their normal activities though, this can be pretty risky, and it is entirely optional, but it could get you to lockpicking level 5. Finally, you can also purchase some food from the cook and sell her your legally acquired goods, whatever those may be at this point, and take whatever you haven't eaten from the kitchen if you're hungry. But apart from that, as long as the village of Talmberg itself is still locked to you, there's not much else to do. Now, the game recommends taking a horse when leaving the castle, and depending on how thoroughly you have looted the place, or at least depending on how much of the stuff you stole you want to take with you, this may or may not be possible. The horse you took from Skalitz is still in the courtyard, and it can be mounted even if you're overloaded, but there's a limit of about 110 pounds carried. Once you have more than that on you, you will no longer be able to saddle up. So make a decision, either leave some stuff behind, or take everything and leave the horse, proceeding on foot and rather slowly at that. Be warned though, whatever you leave behind you won't have access to for quite some time once you leave. Head down to the gate, and if you're wearing the correct gear, the guard will let you leave and closes the gate behind you so you won't get back in. Alternatively, if you don't want to go through all the trouble of stealing armor and persuading the guard, you can also just jump off the drawbridge and escape the castle that way. Beware, with the negative brittle bones perk for extra fall damage, this can seriously hurt you. Guards will also be after you and will catch you if you can't sprint from being overweight, but it is by far the quickest and easiest way to leave. At this point, if you're above the carry weight limit, regardless of whether or not your horse still carries you, I highly recommend riding down into Talmberg village and renting a room at the local inn. For the low price of just 2 Groschen, not only does this allow you to save your game by sleeping in the bed, but you can also store all your excess gear in the chest. The useful thing about this, chests in taverns and inns are connected via a shared inventory system, so anything you store in here you can access from any other room you rent later. Doing this is strongly encouraged, as being overweight can slow down the next part of your journey quite a bit, as you'll be on foot for most of it, even if you initially took a horse. It can even be dangerous, more on that in a second. I recommend storing everything apart from a torch, perhaps a shield, a bow and some arrows, your worn gear, make sure to keep the guard armor equipped for now, some Savior Schnapps, Rattay's sword, which you can't drop anyway, and a few lightweight items like lockpicks and bandages. On the tavern grounds, Marta will buy stolen goods from you, again not recommended because of the hefty price reduction. There's a villager you can play dice with, and you can chat about this and that with some of the other folks around. This might also just get you to speech level 4, at which point I recommend picking the Highborn perk for a +3 speech increase when talking to nobles. This is mutually exclusive with the Lowborn perk, but commoners and peasants usually don't have the highest stats, and they can be charmed or bullied to get what you want, whereas the bonus comes in handy with the nobility, who do not appreciate that kind of behavior. Once you have unloaded everything, it's time to head towards Skalitz. Don't worry, you won't need to go the entire distance. After just a few moments on horseback, or a few more on foot, you are treated to a cutscene that takes you most of the rest of the way. From here on out, you'll have to proceed on foot, regardless of whether you took a horse or not. You may notice that you have returned to the small village of Rovna, and you are surrounded by dead bodies that you can loot, but don't get your hopes up. Apart from the occasional coin or dried food item, it's not really worth it, and it also does not make you any better than the looters you're about to encounter. Just a few meters down the path, you'll run into the first one. Time for your very first real combat encounter. You'll be using Ratzig's sword for this, so no additional weapons are needed, and I recommend playing it aggressively. Your gear outmatches the looters by far, so you can take the occasional hit while he goes down quickly. However, if you are aiming for the merciful achievement and don't want to kill anyone, you can alternatively just take a wide berth around this guy, as well as all following looters, by staying off the roads. Once they spot you and engage in combat, they will follow you for quite some time, and there's multiple along the way, so if you want to avoid fighting, it's better to not get spotted in the first place. Unless you're going for this achievement though, I recommend fighting them to gain some valuable experience points towards your combat skills. This is also the section where being overloaded can be extremely dangerous, as outrunning the looters won't be possible, and fighting them might also be harder. So unless you plan to and can circumvent them entirely, it's better to have some spare carrying capacity. After the first looter has been dealt with, it doesn't matter which path you take, both eventually merge back into each other. Then, once you get to the broken down cart, continue down that road and witness Henry shoo off another looter you won't have to fight.
Hey!
For some highly recommended extra loot, head left once you reach the small shrine. You'll come across a bridge, and on the other side of it, head down the bank to the right to find a treasure chest. In hardcore mode, the loot inside is a little reduced, but still very much worth grabbing. The total value here is just over 1,500 Groschen. Make sure not to advance too much further towards the building though, as a group of bandits has taken up residence here, and they are much tougher than the looters. So return to the path. If you're itching for a bit more combat, head all the way back to the shrine, and then take the fork on the right to meet another looter, one that you would otherwise be able to circumvent by taking a more direct route from the hidden treasure chest back to the road leading to Skalitz. Back on that road, you'll soon find the nearest gate into the village completely crumbled and need to loop around for the next one. Another looter sits across the path. This one is number 3, so deal with him as you see fit. Do note that upon landing the first 2 to 3 hits on these guys, the looters will most likely realize that they are outmatched and yield, at which point you can show mercy and let them live, thus gaining both some combat XP and keeping your hopes of unlocking the merciful achievement alive. While it is extremely likely that this happens, it is not guaranteed, so engage in fights at your own risk or drop a save beforehand. Finally, you'll enter the burned down village of Skalitz. One of the first bodies you'll come across is the bailiff's. Henry makes a remark about him dying with his sword in his hand, a sword that you won't find when pressing the loot button. Instead, pick it up directly from his hand. It is a decent starter weapon. Eventually, you'll also find Bianca, who you can take a ring and some Savior Schnapps from, and eventually you'll reach your parents, watch the cutscene, and then begin the search for a spade. For this, you'll have to go back into the village, and another cutscene will play as soon as you come across the Bishek's house. Pick the speech option in the first dialogue check for some experience points, then you can make him leave without a fight by selecting the Intimidate option.
I've interrupted you robbing the dead. Is that why you're so ill-tempered? You bastard. Haven't you got a shred of honor?
Alternatively, provoke him into a fight. Be warned though, he is a capable brawler, and a one-on-one fist fight with him is everything but guaranteed to go well. However, you can always draw your weapon during the scuffle with him. That will send him packing immediately. Once he's dealt with, grab the spade, but importantly, before heading to Henry's home to dig the grave, head for the small alley between the 2 houses directly to the opposite side. It appears as if someone has already been busy burying a few of the corpses in the village, as you can dig up a body right next to the pile of manure below the wooden pole. The gear on this one is all extremely tattered and not worth taking, but jumping the fence to the left a little further down, there is another grave right behind the burnt down building in the middle. and this one contains 50 groschen and a valuable cup that you both want to take. Admittedly, looting this grave early can feel a bit cheesy, as you only learn about it later, but this saves you a bit of backtracking, and who knows, a curious Henry may have stumbled upon it by accident anyway.
I know this goblet. It belongs to Baron. But who knows? Maybe he managed to get away. Now what?
Apart from this, though, no further loot can be acquired. All other houses are conveniently inaccessible, so head to your house next. Before digging the grave, pick the lock on the chest in the room to the right. Even if you picked it during the prologue, it is locked again at this point. Then grab everything from your trunk, no matter how overloaded this makes you. Head outside and dig the grave, which triggers another cutscene that eventually leads into a fight that you cannot win, so don't even bother. For the last bit of optimizing, you might even want to take off all armor and clothing before the cutscene to avoid them getting damaged, but since it just takes 1 to 2 hits to down you, this might be overkill. Another cutscene plays, and finally you'll be treated to the opening title. Yes, everything up until now was just the introduction. Enjoy the beautiful scenery, and then get transported back into a nightmarish red as you find yourself back in Skalitz reliving the events of the raid. In this section you still have your sword, so use it to take out as many people as you can, as this actually translates into real-world experience points, and yes, even taking out the villagers counts. Eventually you'll wake up with Theresa standing over you, you get to have a few short conversations with her, and then you're back up on your feet in the Mill of Rattay. This is where the game really begins to open up, although we will not stray too far from the path that is laid out in front of us, at least not initially. Now, you'll always wake up in the mill around 2 in the afternoon, which gives you plenty of time before the night sets in. So, speak to Theresa, pick up and eat the bread from the cabinet, and also help yourself to some food from the pot. From this point onwards, you'll want to make sure to keep your nourishment between 50 and 100 for 5 straight days to unlock the Balanced Diet Vitality perk. Then take a closer look at the chest next to the bed. It has all your gear, not only the stuff you had on you after you returned to Skalitz, but also all the items you may have stored in the Talmberg Inn, thanks to KCD's shared inventory system. The only things missing will be Sir Radzig's sword and, crucially, any lockpicks you had. From this chest, you'll want to grab a few essentials, put together an outfit that gets you to a charisma score of 10 or higher, including the +2 bonus from the flower power perk, but you don't need to have any armor just yet, and you can also leave the truly valuable stuff inside for now. It makes more sense to sell it instead of using it. As always, try to keep your carry weight as low as possible, and don't worry, you will return to the mill again shortly. Do make sure to grab a torch though, otherwise you could get into trouble later. Outside, talk to Miller Peshek, who will ask you for help paying off your debt. Now, if you followed this guide, you likely have the 100 groschen it takes to pay him off, but I strongly recommend saving that money and agreeing to help him.
I think I've already heard more than I need to know. You've got the tongue of the devil himself. If you tried hard enough, I bet you could justify sodomy with a gun.
Very importantly, make sure to talk to him a second time after this initial conversation and ask him to teach you lockpicking. Not only will this give you 15 lockpicks for free, it will also allow you to practice lockpicking on an easy training chest. This chest keeps relocking after being picked, so keep going until it no longer does. Depending on how much XP you have already earned, this could get you to lockpicking level 5. Once the chest has been exhausted, you can pick another easy one behind the door to your left, and there's also some food in the basket to the left of the door that you can take without it being considered stealing. If you take the short path to the river, you'll find another pot you can eat from and a basket with a stone on top of it containing 2 bottles of moonshine. Now at this point, if you have the A Woman's Lot DLC installed, you might want to talk to Theresa again, although chances are that she's resting and can't be spoken to. Either way, whenever you get a chance, you can ask about and acquire Mutt, the dog you encountered during your return to Skalitz, and you can also trigger Theresa's questline by speaking to her, allowing you to experience the Skalitz raid from her perspective. In this guide we're not going to do that, but if you have the DLC, it can be worth taking Mutt into some of the early quests. You won't need him immediately, but he can be very useful in one of the next stages of the main quest. Also, from a completionist perspective, Mod brings with him the Houndmaster skill, and using him as a sidekick is required to max that out. If he's dismissed, he will simply return to the Rattay Mill.
Wanna go with me? Come on then, we'll get on like a house on fire.
And while we're on the topic of DLC, all other DLC have specific quest lines that can only be triggered after a certain point in the main quest has been reached, and that's still pretty far into the future and thus won't be covered in this guide. Now, time to crack on with Peshek's quest. You'll find a spade leaning by the cart near the wood storage. Take it and head out to the road, turn right towards the building with the white tents. This is the Rattay bathhouse that you might want to bookmark for later. There's some marigold growing in the area, and you can also find a small camping site behind the bathhouse with another pot to eat from. These pots, by the way, are scattered all over the map, and they regenerate, so you can eat from them at least once per day. Behind the pots, turn right, cross the bridge, follow the path towards the house. There's nothing of value inside, so we can skip it, and turn right up and into the forest. Keep following the path up the hill until you see another house, the executioner's home. Before the small gate in the fence, head left through the bushes and towards Gallows Hill. This will pretty much take you directly to the grave you need to dig up. Once you discover that the body has no ring on it, the game sends you back to Peshek, who in turn will only send you back to the executioner's house. I would like to argue that Henry is smart enough to come up with the idea that the executioner took the ring himself, so let's skip the return to Peshek and talk to the executioner right away. For some extra speech XP, ask him about the buried convict directly, and then pick the speech option but refuse to pay. Afterwards, initiate another conversation and pick the get him out of the house option. Shortly after, he will run to the mill. Wait a few seconds until he's out of sight and go to work, ignoring the barking dogs. After all, their master has other matters to attend to. The chest in the entryway contains roughly 30 groschen and some clothing. The ring is in the first chest in the room on the left, together with some Savior Schnapps. There's another chest in the room that you can pick for XP, but it doesn't have anything of value inside. At this point, you will likely have reached stealth level 3 and have a perk point available, and really you can't go wrong with any of the stealth perks, apart from Daring Debonair. This perk is widely considered to be almost useless because it does not work the way it is written. Instead, you will benefit from the bonuses to strength and vitality only if you are caught committing a crime, which is generally not a good idea, especially in the early game. Regardless, the number of perk points you earn allows you to select all perks in the stealth tree, so you really only decide the order in which you take them. Still, I would recommend saving the perk point until level 5 to unlock both Crouching Chameleon and Stealth Kill in one go. Now, with the ring in your possession, return to Peshek. If you're fast enough, you can catch the executioner talking to him, but don't worry, despite sounding like it, he won't confront you.
I'll kick that fucker's ass!
Exhaust all dialogue options with Peshek, who will send you to the miller in Kohelnitz and offer to purchase stolen goods from you at this point. However, just like any other person who buys them, he will only give you a fraction of their worth, but there is another way if you're patient. Simply store the stolen goods in your chest for a few days, and the stolen tag will eventually vanish, allowing you to sell them at full price to any trader. Alternatively, moving far away from the place where an item was stolen also removes the stolen tag, and this is why most of the stolen gear in your chest is not marked as such. It has been there for several days now, and Rattay is also decently far away from Skalitz and Talmberg. Now, we're not done with Peshek just yet. Up next, we want him to teach us pickpocketing. Like lockpicking, pickpocketing takes a while to get used to and is, in my opinion, the inferior way of obtaining valuables, but the completionists among you might want to max it out, so let me briefly explain. While out of your target's sight, you hold the pickpocketing key. The longer you hold, the more time you have to rummage through the target's pockets. Once the color starts to shift towards red, let go and the pickpocketing menu opens. You'll have to manually move the cursor to the right spot, reveal what's inside, and also confirm that you want to take it. That's not all though, you also need to move back to the top to safely end the pickpocketing attempt, otherwise you'll get caught.
That's the way. I hardly noticed you were there.
Having low conspicuousness, visibility and noise stats is crucial to not be seen. All of those are influenced by the clothing you wear, and targeting people who are asleep also increases your odds. I recommend training with Peshek for a little while until you get the hang of it. You can ask him again and again to teach you, and it takes only a few attempts to get to pickpocketing level 2, and you can pick your first perk. If you actually want to do some pickpocketing, then select the Comrade perk, which might be a little confusingly worded, but essentially just gives you a big boost to how long you can safely rummage through someone's pockets, even if you don't have exactly matching charisma stats. If you don't want to pickpocket, then go with Secret Pockets, which gives you more money from slain enemies. Now at this point it should be early evening, but the day is not done yet. Making sure that you have grabbed a torch and Baron's cup from your chest, let's head up to Rattay itself. Visiting Miller Wojciech would simply take too long on foot. Following the same path you took earlier, run past the bathhouse and stay left until you reach the gate guards. When presented with a dialogue check, the speech option is the one that gets you past them. Heading into the city, be on the lookout for Baron and his wife, who are having an argument near some tents. Like many others, the two are survivors from Skalitz who have taken refuge in the city, and life is not exactly kind to them. Speak to Baron, although his first conversation won't give you a chance to present him with his cup. You could talk to him a second time to give it to him, but doing so would waste an opportunity for precious speech XP, so instead try to locate a surviving Kunesh who often hangs around by the stone stairs just around the corner. Reminding him of his debt brings up a dialogue check in which you want to select the charisma option to succeed. Kunesh will reveal information about the cup that you already have, and at this point it is up to you to decide. You can give Baron both his cup and the 50 Groschen you found in Skalitz, keep the money and just hand over the cup, or keep everything to yourself and sell the cup to a trader. After all, it is quite valuable. Giving him everything gives you a substantial boost to your reputation with the Skalitz refugees, which can be advantageous in dialogue or later when you pick perks that build upon high reputation. Still, I don't have a clear recommendation here. Selling the cup and keeping the money can set you up nicely too.
You don't even know how much you've helped us. And if you know my wife, then you'll know you've just saved my life.
Following this encounter, you should also be able to locate a vagabond in blue trousers who will offer the Rob the Rich, Give to the Poor activity. He wants you to steal 50 Groschen from a guard, something you best not attempt with your meager pickpocketing skills while he's patrolling. Instead, it's best to wait until he's asleep. Alternatively, give the vagabond some of your own coin, don't worry, he'll pay you back half, for a quick reputation boost. Although, with money being tight in the early game, I don't recommend this. At this point, head to the nearby castle, meet some familiar faces near the stairs, climb all the way up and watch a lengthy cutscene, which eventually unlocks the Awakening achievement. Once you regain control of Henry, you might want to get out a torch, otherwise guard might stop you to pay a 10 Groschen fine, as walking around without a torch at night is forbidden. If you want to do a little stealing, the upper floor has a room to the left with an easy lock chest that contains 2 books, while the first floor has an unlocked room to the right with a hard lock chest that contains some goblets and chalices, and 2 more can be found in the easy lock chest in the kitchen at the end of the corridor. With a bit of luck, you can also get into the room on the left side, if its occupant is inside, where you can take a treasure map from the bookcase, and this is not considered stealing and can therefore be done even with eyes directly on you. All other rooms unfortunately have nothing of value or very hard locks that you probably won't be able to pick yet. Be wary though, your reputation in Rattay starts off pretty low, so guards are more likely to stop and search you, and they will confiscate any stolen goods they might find.
What the fuck is this? All these things are stolen. You'll be leaving that here? Got it, laddie.
With the night slowly setting in, you will most likely not be able to train with Captain Bernard to continue the main quest right away, as he only appears near the training ground during the day. If you wait until about 10 in the evening, you might check your map to find that the guard you have to steal those 50 Groschen from has retired to a building in the center of town. Getting inside is easy if you use the first floor side door, but this is a building that several guards sleep in, so be very careful once stepping inside. Your target will most likely be in one of the upstairs bedrooms, but there might be other guards nearby. If that's the case, I'd recommend coming back another night, but if he's alone in the room, you can rob him, either by pickpocketing or choking him out. That's perhaps a little safer and also offers a vastly expanded inventory to pick from. Take the money and whatever else you feel like, and then hightail it out of there and to the other end of town, east towards the training grounds, for which you should have a map marker. Make sure to stay out of the way of any guards who might search you, and also have your torch out. The vagabond is likely already asleep at this point, so we're saving him for the next day. Once you reach the training grounds, follow the road passing them on the left, and shortly after, you'll reach the Broken Wheel Inn. While there are 2 more taverns inside the town, this is the only one where you can rent a bed for the night. Approach the innkeeper to do exactly that. The room you'll be assigned has another shared chest that you can store any stolen goods inside to avoid losing them should you get searched on the next day. Don't forget to also grab some food, either from your chest or by purchasing it from the inn. You'll want to eat enough so that your nourishment does not drop below 50 during the night. Alternatively, you can steal some food from the inn's cellar, accessible via an easy locked door just outside the main tap room. Down here you can also find another treasure map located on some barrels to the right. Once you have everything you need, head up to your room and sleep, again making sure to keep nourishment over 50 while recovering as much energy as possible. 2 things I should mention at this point. From now on hardcore mode with the negative somnambulant perk, it's possible to wake up elsewhere, for example on the outskirts of town. It usually won't take more than 1 in-game hour to get back to where you slept, but keep this in mind for time-sensitive activities. Also, the negative nightmares perk gives you a debuff lasting for 2 hours after waking up, so ideally you wake up 2 hours before you need to be at the top of your game. Speaking of which, on the next morning you should receive a new quest called Rattay Tourney, as your visit to the castle the evening before has triggered the first of the weekly tournaments happening in Rattay. While this tournament can be a decent moneymaker, it can also be quite difficult to win, especially if you're playing on hardcore mode. You'll get a chance to train a bit beforehand, but still, if you're not yet entirely comfortable with the combat system in KCD, it might be better to skip this one. If you want to enroll, and you're confident that you'll win, you can visit Miller Peshek and bet on yourself beforehand. If you succeed, you'll earn 5 times your wager, up to 500 Groschen, despite Peshek stating that you'll only get double. Personally, despite its difficulty, I actually recommend taking part, even on hardcore mode, but there's a few things we need to do first. It's going to be a busy day. Now, after breakfast, it's time for combat training with Bernard. Bring some armor, but don't equip it just yet. In fact, since you'll have to endure a few hits yourself, make sure to take off any gear you don't want to see needlessly damaged. I highly recommend doing the basic training first. This will be a repetition of your training session with Combat Master Vanyak and Skalitz, which also means that the bit where you need to land chained hits can be cheesed for a little extra combat XP. During the zone change and feint tutorials, you can also deliberately do the wrong attacks to prolong the training session. Don't worry though, in a short while you will be able to repeatedly train with Bernard for as long as you like, so getting a few more XP out of him in this first round isn't giving you a massive advantage. I strongly recommend using this initial training session to improve your sword skill to at least level 3, at which point you'll earn a perk point. During the Perfect Block tutorial, a move that you should make yourself intimately familiar with by the way, you'll be interrupted, and shortly after the training moves from sword fighting to the archery range. On your way, make sure to pick the Zorn-Ort combo from the sword skill tree, and depending on how confident you are in your fighting skills, you might also want to re-equip your gear, including some slightly more protective stuff. In the archery tutorial, use the time during Bernard's dialogue to practice your aim. You'll notice that the yellow dot marking the center of the screen disappears when you have a bow out. To hit your target, you'll want the tip of the arrow to point slightly to the right of it, while the left side of your hand should roughly line up with it. It's not an exact science. My personal recommendation would be to drop a save just before entering the archery range and practicing a bit to get a good feel for it. For the following duel with Sir Hans, you want to get into double-digit points reliably. Finishing first also earns you 3 bonus points, and that should usually secure the victory. Don't worry, even with the negative shakes perk on hardcore mode, it is quite possible to reliably hit the target with a bit of practice. Immediately afterwards, Capon challenges you to a duel with swords, real ones this time, not the wooden kind. Having a bit of armor on can make this a bit easier, albeit at the price of that armor getting damaged. Use what you've learned with Bernard and play things defensively. Perfect blocks should be at the heart of your strategy in this fight, and can often be followed with a quick stab for a high damage hit to the head. Most importantly though, having access to the Zorn-Ort combo makes the fight significantly easier, and it's a super easy combo to master, because Henry's weapon will automatically follow through to the opposite angle you attacked from. For example, if you attack from the high left, then Henry's next attack will always come from the low right. Coincidentally, high left followed by low right are the first two moves in the Zorn-Ort combo, followed by a simple stab that does not need to be aimed. At this point, it should be worth noting that the game registers hits to different body parts, so Zorn-Ort is very good at damaging chest armor since the last stab hits the enemy multiple times, but at the same time, it does not do as much damage as other combos that target the head. In Capon's case, that is doubly true, since his chest is protected by armor, his head meanwhile is not. One more tip, during longer combat encounters, listen for your opponent gasping. This means that they have run out of stamina and won't be quite as able to block your attacks, giving you the perfect opportunity to launch into an attack of your own. Successfully executing a combo also usually leaves the opponent vulnerable to at least one more follow-up hit. All of this can be used to defeat Hans Capon. During the recording for this, I even managed to do so without taking a single hit, but I'll admit that was one of my better performances. Now, if you win, you'll earn Capon's hunting bow, one of the better early game bows in KCD, although you likely won't have the stats to use it yet. After the fight, speak to Bernard again, who will send you to the Bailiff. Take the gate on the right, past the tournament, you can still enroll if you like, and before you go through the last stone archway, have a chat with the Huntsman. He will give you the A Bird in the Hand side quest. Accept it, but don't follow up on it just yet.
It went something like this.
What? People keep birds like that in their houses?
You can also trade with him. He sells a few high-level bows and another treasure map. Move along to the Bailiff, who has you join the town guard and sends you to the armory to pick up the appropriate gear. You also get 60 Groschen as payment and can ask about learning to read, a very useful skill that Henry does not yet possess, so do so to unlock another quest in Uschitz, which is pretty far away though. If you're confident in your ability to win the tourney, now might also be a good time to nip back to the mill and place a bet with Peszek. If you do go all out, you can only do this a limited number of times before Peszek will no longer accept your bets. Up next, head to the armory to pick up your gear, but instead of speaking to the town guard Nightingale, run back to Bernard to continue training. Once again, I recommend taking off your gear for this. One thing you definitely want to learn are Master Strikes, but you'll need to have at least one weapon skill at level 3 to do so. That should be the case with your sword, so get to it. You'll also need to win a duel against Bernard, and if you apply what already worked against Capon, you should have little trouble. Master Strikes will then be unlocked for all types of weapons, regardless of what you trained with. They are a bit more difficult to time than perfect blocks, but if you can pull one off, it's a great way to deal damage while remaining defensive, and they can almost always be followed up with at least one free hit. On top of that, you'll also want to learn combos, or rather the one that Bernard can teach you. This gives you a second one for free, and this one targets the head with the final strike, so it deals a decent amount of damage. Additionally, you can once again deliberately perform the wrong attacks in this tutorial to earn some extra XP. Once you have learned Master Strikes and the False Edge combo, I recommend you keep training with Bernard a little longer. Don't worry, time actually does not progress while you train, and this is a good and most importantly safe way to reach some useful skill thresholds. However, I strongly advise against practicing with a real weapon, as unlike in the previous training fights, any injuries you sustain from now on will remain, and you'll have to spend your own resources to take care of them. So either choose to practice with a wooden sword or go through the combo tutorials a few more times. What you should aim for is level 4 in the strength skill to select both Mule 1 to improve your carrying capacity, as well as Clinch Master, which comes in handy in fist fights, and you might have one in the not so distant future. Also, level 4 in Warfare lets you pick up the Bloodletter perk. This is useful because drawing an opponent's blood will cause them a wound that steadily gets worse and can eventually kill them, even if you don't land any further hits. Finally, I highly recommend level 5 in the Sword skill. Here you can either pick up the Fehler combo if you plan to continue fighting with a longsword, or grab Blunt Strike if you want to switch to a short sword, perhaps in combination with a shield. You can of course also practice combat with different weapons, although I have personally found the Sword skill to be sufficient to carry you through the entirety of the game. Also, perks for maces and axes are only unlocked once you reach level 7 in the respective skill, so you'd need to train for quite some time. Now, should you reach main level 4 during any of this, I recommend picking the Insomniac perk, so that you can stay awake longer and won't have to sleep as much. In a sense, this also reduces the effect that eating heavy foods has on you, as you of course still lose energy from doing so, but your overall energy loss from running around is reduced, so the effect is perhaps not quite as detrimental. Finally, ask Bernard about some work to receive the Ruin activity, alongside the task to take out a bandit camp to the east. Bernard, and other NPCs as well, can also give you another form of training, purchasing skill XP for money. In my opinion though, that's not really necessary, especially early on and especially in the combat skills, since it is quite expensive and early skill levels are earned quickly. Now at this point it's time to decide. If you want to enroll in the tournament, speak to the heralds, pay the 60 groschen entry fee and fight your way through all 3 combatants. Be warned though, the fights get progressively more difficult. However, even if you lose, the tournament is a great way to further boost your combat skills in a more realistic scenario, while weapons and armor will be given to you, and any injuries you suffer will also be automatically removed after the fights. Alternatively, and this is what I would recommend, it is also possible to complete the tourney and still reach Nightingale in time. The tourney ends at 6 PM and you have until 7 to meet up with the guard. Yes, winning the tournament is tricky, even more so on hardcore mode with all negative perks, but it is possible, and at least the first 1 or 2 opponents should be manageable. I consider 60 groschen a fair price to pay for what are most likely going to be several skill increases, and who knows, you might even beat Black Peter and win the 400 groschen prize alongside the very valuable Lords of Liper gauntlets. Strategy-wise, playing it defensively and waiting for master strikes followed by hits to the head is probably the safest bet, but again, even that does not guarantee you win. So, back to Nightingale. The tour around Rattay is pretty straightforward. The dispute between the armorsmith and a beggar woman can be solved however you see fit, the speech option is likely the best solution, and eventually it'll be evening and you find yourself ringing the bell and closing the tavern. Another encounter with Hans Capon leads to a fistfight where the Clinch Master perk can prove useful, but regardless of the outcome, you'll be sent hunting on the following morning. With little else to do, you want to spend this night back at the mill, as your patrol with Nightingale has unlocked the Courtship quest. On your way there, stop by the Bailiff to grab the Aquarius quest. Helping hands are needed, and Henry might be best suited to assess the Skalitz folk. The 2 people you need to talk to are likely asleep already, so head to the mill and sleep there until the next morning. If Theresa is still awake when you arrive, you can also talk to her. She has a few things to say about the work assignments too. She is also the one you need to wait for on the next morning, and she likes to sleep in. Oftentimes, she won't get up until somewhere around 9 AM.
What? No, go away.
Once she does, ask her to join you on a walk. Don't worry, despite being told to meet Sir Hans at dawn, he will wait for you until around 10 AM. After completing your stroll along the river, you should be back at the mill in time to run up to the castle and still make it to Capon before he leaves. And even if you don't, he will be back the next morning. If you have the A Woman's Lot DLC installed, decide whether you want to use the hunting trip to level up your bow skills. In that case, you might want to leave Mud at home, or whether you like to bring him along to hunt as many hares as possible. What you should also bring is some food and a melee weapon, just in case. Then meet up with Sir Hans. While it is possible, acquiring a horse before starting this quest is not necessary. Doing so only unlocks a tiny bit of unique dialogue, but it doesn't really speed up the quest, as Hans rides very slowly. Make sure though not to lose him. If you fall too far behind or run too far ahead, you'll have to go all the way to the campsite on foot, and won't get the fast travel montage. Once you arrive, follow along with the quest, share as much with Sir Hans as you can for a reputation boost, and then you can already go back to sleep. There's food in the trunk, as well as some arrows and a bow that you can use if you didn't bring one yourself. Once it's hunting time, make sure not to follow Capon into the area where he's hunting, otherwise he will deduct a few groschen from your prize money. Instead, simply take the path up the hill and stay there. For your outfit, you want to be as silent as possible, but don't take off your vambraces just yet, otherwise shooting your bow will hurt you. To win the friendly competition, shooting and looting, just a single hare is enough, but I recommend you try to earn as much XP as you can until you run out of hunting arrows, although it is probably not worth wasting the better ones on this. You can move pretty close to the hares, but since they're so small, they can be tough to hit. With Mutt, hunting hares is much easier, since he kills them instantly, but also does so quicker than you can shoot them. You need to have your Houndmaster skill at level 3 for this to be possible though, but that is easily achieved by just repeatedly praising him until it gets there.
That's my boy.
On hardcore mode, one more challenge you might run into in the forest is getting yourself lost. This is where the game's wait menu comes in handy. Use that to check the time and then check where the sun is. At 8 in the morning, the sun points directly east, at noon, 1 PM, it points south, and at 6 PM it points west. If you're playing without a map marker, you can use this to get a rough idea of where you are and where you need to go. Another trick involves the bird cages you received from the Rattay Huntsman. One more reason why accepting this quest early makes a lot of sense. Simply dropping one on the ground leaves a map marker marking the exact spot where you're currently standing. Once the hunt is concluded, meet up with Sir Hans, and only after receiving your prize money cook up all the meat at the campfire, as the raw meat is what decides the winner. Then follow him to hunt a boar, and afterwards, to find him, roughly follow the direction he went in until you reach a path. Turning right, you should see where the path exits the forest to the north. What you're looking for is an almost hidden path heading east. There's a grave nearby that you can dig up for some loot, mostly groschen, then follow the path. It curves through the forest for quite a bit, but eventually, down to the right, you'll see some tents, and you can also hear Sir Hans shortly after. Looks like he's gotten himself captured by cumans.
What are you gaping at, you blowfly? Never seen a real man before?
Now at this point you have several options on how to proceed. If you're feeling confident, you can take on the two enemies in a fight. One will most likely shoot you with arrows while the other engages in melee. Make sure to keep some cover between you and the archer, and the fight is definitely winnable. Alternatively, you can simply sneak up on Sir Hans from behind and untie him, and then sneak away without risking a fight at all. Even in broad daylight, the cumans usually don't notice. A third option presents itself if you wait until nightfall. With the cumans asleep, not only will it be much easier to untie Capon and not get noticed, but you can also ambush them, potentially choking one of them out, or killing one before the other gets up, at which point it's a one-on-one duel that you should be able to win. I recommend taking both cumans out so that you can loot the camp in peace. There's two chests, one containing the cumans' gear, at least all the stuff they don't currently have on them, while the other has potions, goblets and some money. Loot both, then untie Sir Hans and speak to him, which will trigger your return to Rattay and unlock the body achievement. Regardless of whether you untied Capon immediately or waited until nightfall, you'll always be back in Rattay at around 11 in the morning, and your next quest is already waiting for you. The Neuhof stables have been attacked. Since your energy and nourishment levels remain the same as they were when you left off in the cuman camp, it is advantageous to attack it during the day to conserve some food and energy for what comes next. Since the food in your inventory also does not lose any of its freshness during all of this, the cooked hare meat from your hunting trip should still be good to sell. A quick sprint over to the Rattay Huntsman allows you to get rid of it and make a few groschen.
Alright, so?
If you don't dally, you should be able to make it back to Bernard and his men in time before they ride off without you. Crucially, and this is why I recommend getting on with the main quest line as soon as you get to Rattay, you now have access to your very own horse. And unlike the horse you rode from Skalitz to Talmberg, this one is yours to keep for the rest of the game. That means you can now traverse the map much faster, and you also have another way to store some goods, as your horse has a carrying capacity of almost 200 pounds. Also, guards may search you, but they will not search your horse, making it the ideal place to store your stolen goods. Now, with Bernard and his men, ride to Neuhof. You don't actually have to follow them and can ride ahead at your own pace if you like. Then follow the quest line, inspect the dead horses and bodies, then talk to Zora, then to Jakub standing nearby. A speech skill of 5 or the first aid 2 perk is needed to get him on slightly friendlier terms. The latter is available at main level 6, so speech is likely more attainable. Going past another dead body and a guard, head towards the main stables. Talk to Mark. You should be able to succeed at the charisma check with a charisma of 6 or higher, and Mark will tell you everything you need to know, but speak to Ginger standing by the open gate anyway to complete your objective. While there are more villagers nearby, you won't be able to engage in any meaningful conversation. Depending on how much of a renegade you want to be, either return to Bernard and report your findings, or explore the north of the farm by yourself. From a pushed-over sack of flour, tracks and blood splatters are leading through a destroyed gate and into the forest. Follow the small path until you get to another road and another pool of blood.
They went deeper and deeper, for sure.
Another path leads into the next forest section, and if you were fast enough, you'll soon hear voices. 2 bandits are sitting in a clearing, one fatally injured. Take out the other one, or just wait, he will eventually leave once his comrade has perished. Either way, you'll have at least one body to loot, do so and return to the stables. Talk to Mark or Zora, who will both point you towards Jakub, who will share some information that you should report to Bernard. It should be early afternoon by now, so get on your horse and ride back down the path you came from, but at the first intersection turn right and keep going in that direction at the next crossroads too. Follow the path. After a left turn leads you past a shrine, you'll reach the herbalist. She has a treasure map for sale, as well as several bane potions, very strong poisons that you want to purchase at least one of. There's an alchemy bench down here too that you could in theory use to craft potions and poisons yourself, but for that you'd need some recipes, and to use those you'd need to be able to read. As long as neither of those requirements are met, you only have access to the recipe for Savior Schnapps, and it's hardly legible. However, it is also not entirely illegible. You can clearly tell that 1 nettle and 2 belladonna are required, and the symbol at the top also matches the one for wine. It's not too difficult to puzzle together the rest of the instructions, but still, even if you succeed, without further recipes, you'll be stuck making Savior Schnapps and not much else. The herbalist herself sells a few recipes, but the good stuff is very expensive, so let's acquire some of them another way and amass some valuables at the same time. Return to the stables, and where you turned right earlier, you now want to go left, in this case straight ahead. Once you get to a small bridge crossing the river, leave the path and ride down the river's left bank until it meets another stream. Here, a grave overgrown with marigold lies in the shadows of some trees. Dig it up to find some valuable treasure, including the recipe for Bane Potion, a strong poison. Cross over that second stream, it might be easier to do so on foot than on horseback, and follow the path you now have in front of you down to the right. This path crosses the river twice and eventually has a small path leading off of it that goes directly to the charcoal burners. The spokesman is who you want to talk to, the speech check is almost impossible to fail, and you now have a new destination to the north. However, before going there, locate the small path heading up the hill and into the woods at the back of the campsite. Follow that path until you reach a burnt-down campsite. The hard-locked chest contains some valuables. The path ends here, but you want to keep going in its rough direction towards the east, always heading uphill. It can be a bit tricky to locate, but you should eventually be able to spot another grave with a wheelbarrow nearby. The treasure inside contains a short sword with the highest stab damage in the entire game, as well as a lucky dice to be used in Farkle and a few other goodies. Head back down to the charcoal burners and follow the road south to the left side of the river. Once you get to a small wooden bridge, leave the path and turn left up the hill, heading for its highest point. Get off the horse and crawl through the bushes. You should soon spot some rocks ahead of you. A small hut is nearby, a dead person outside of it, with a bottle of poison in his hand that you want to grab. Inside the hut is an easy log chest with plenty more valuables, including a noble sword and cuirass, both very good items that remain serviceable until the late game. Head back down the road, cross the bridge and stay left along the river until you reach another small bridge to the left. Be careful now, this bridge leads right into the bandit camp that Captain Bernard wants you to clear as part of the ruin activity. It has quite a few bandits in it, 5 or 6 are possible, so storming in is probably not an option. The mineshaft a little towards the back of the camp makes for a nice choke point if you do decide to fight them all, but even here you can easily get overwhelmed. This mineshaft also has a chest at its back with some valuables. If you want to make life a little easier for yourself, wait until nightfall, sneak up onto the bandit's pot in the middle of camp and drop a Bane potion in it. Move away and wait until morning, and bandits who've eaten the poisoned food will be dead within hours. Unfortunately, this only seems to work semi-reliably. I found that a single Bane potion usually only takes out 2 people, and once they're down, the camp goes on high alert. Still, that's 2 people less you have to worry about. You can also apply poison to your sword or arrows to harm enemies once they've been hit. Alternatively, just come back later once you've leveled up a bit. This is by no means a quest that needs to be completed early. However you decided to deal with the bandits, at this point it's probably time to return to Rattay to drop off some goods, restock and sleep for the night. So go back the small path along the river towards the shrine, take the path going up and follow it. It takes you directly to the eastern city gates. And, well, at this point I think you're perfectly capable of tackling the rest of the game yourself. With a horse at your disposal, plenty of valuables to use or sell, a set of skills that should serve you well both in combat and outside of it, and a good grasp of most of the game's core mechanics, I would say you are well prepared to continue Henry's journey, which has only just begun. Your current quest will soon take you to Ushitz, where you can and probably should learn to read. Visiting the Miller Wojciech along the way also unlocks several interesting thieving missions, and of course your courting of Theresa will need to be pursued as well. I could go on and tell you about many more of the encounters and challenges ahead and how to best approach them, but this is supposed to be a getting started guide, not a complete walkthrough. And I hope it helped you getting started, or on a hardcore mode challenge run with all negative perks. Above all though, I really hope you enjoyed this guide. It's not the kind of video I usually make, and it takes a long time to research, write, record and edit this kind of content, but I hope the end result contains some useful information, whether you're just starting out or simply want to optimize your next playthrough. So if the video did help you and you enjoyed it, I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if you think I forgot anything, and if you enjoy a well-researched, completionist approach to video games, then my channel might be worth subscribing to. And if you want to support me and my channel even further, you can find some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or you can even become a channel member or a Patreon supporter. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.